She sat in the Billionaire's seat at the airport lounge. Neither of them expected what would follow. Enjoy listening.
Sometimes life does not arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it waits in quiet rooms.
I do not think you understand what it feels like. That matters.
Not to rescue you, Celine. The not to cover you sentence, Celine.
She did not ask for influence. She asked for a chance.
I assumed something about the world.
I earned this.
We are withdrawing. She was right.
He did not rescue her. He respected her.
This time, it was not an accident. I choose this.
Sometimes love is not about who has more. It is about who stands beside you without making you smaller.
Sometimes life does not arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it waits in quiet rooms between departures. Before we begin, if you find comfort in thoughtful stories about resilience, dignity, and unexpected connection, we warmly invite you to subscribe and stay with us. Your quiet support allows us to continue telling stories that matter. Now let us return to our main character. Claire Reynolds had never imagined she would spend a Tuesday afternoon inside an executive airport lounge at Chicago O'Hare. She stood just beyond the glass entrance for a moment longer than necessary, adjusting the strap of her handbag on her shoulder. The carpet was thick. The lighting was soft and golden. Conversations were low and measured, the kind that suggested people who were used to being heard. Claire was not used to that. Her original ticket had been economy, seat 27B, but the airline had overbooked the flight, and after 2 delays and a quiet apology at the counter, she had been reassigned to business class on the next departure. The lounge access came with it. A small stroke of luck, the agent had called it. Claire did not believe much in luck anyway. If she did not secure the job she was flying to interview for, she would lose her apartment within 2 months. The medical bills from her mother's heart surgery were carefully stacked on her kitchen table back in Dayton, Ohio. Claire had calculated the numbers more times than she cared to admit. There was no margin left, no safety net. This trip was not ambition, it was survival. She walked farther into the lounge, searching for a quiet corner. Most of the leather armchairs were occupied by travelers in tailored jackets, polished shoes, and the calm assurance of people who did not check their bank balances before ordering coffee. Near the window overlooking the runway, she spotted an empty seat, or so she thought. She approached carefully, placed her worn leather folder on the small table, and lowered herself into the chair with a quiet exhale. "Excuse me," a calm male voice said beside her. Claire stiffened immediately. She turned and saw him, a man in his late 30s, seated to her right, his posture relaxed but composed. Dark blazer, crisp white shirt, no tie. His laptop was closed, neatly in front of him. He did not look irritated, only attentive. "I am so sorry," Claire said, already half rising. "I thought the seat was free." "It is," he replied gently. "You are not in my seat." She blinked. "I am not." He gave a small smile. "No, but you looked like you were preparing to flee." A faint flush warmed her cheeks. "I tend to do that," she admitted. Across the lounge, an older woman glanced in their direction, her eyes drifting from the man's tailored jacket to Claire's modest blazer and sensible shoes. The look was brief, but Claire felt it settle. It is not the room that makes you feel small. It is the awareness that you were not expected in it. The man shifted slightly, creating space between them without making a show of it. "Please," he said quietly. "Stay." She hesitated. Every instinct told her to move to avoid drawing attention, but something in his tone was steady, not patronizing, not curious in a way that felt invasive, simply present. She remained seated. For a moment they both looked out at the runway. A plane rolled slowly past the glass, its engines humming softly through the thick windows. "My name is Ethan," he said after a pause. "Claire," she replied. She did not ask what he did for a living. In rooms like this, the answer was usually written in posture and fabric. "Are you flying home?" he asked. "No," she said. "I am flying toward an interview." "That sounds important." "It is," she answered, fingers tightening slightly around the edge of her folder. "It might be the last chance I have." He did not offer advice. He did not interrupt. He simply listened. And in that quiet airport lounge, between the echo of boarding announcements and the steady movement of aircraft outside the glass, a small misunderstanding about a chair became something neither of them yet understood. Some beginnings are not loud. They are simply two people choosing not to walk away. A boarding announcement echoed softly through the lounge, though it was not yet for their flight. Claire glanced up instinctively, then back down at the folder resting on her lap. Ethan noticed the movement. "You are early," he said gently. "I have to be," she replied. "If I miss this one, there is not another option." He did not ask what she meant, but his silence invited explanation. Claire drew in a slow breath. "The company I am interviewing with is expanding their Chicago office. This is the final round. If I do not get it, I go back home and start over." She paused, then added more quietly, "And I do not have much left to start over with." He studied her face, not in curiosity, but in recognition. "How far did you travel?" he asked. "Dayton, Ohio," she said. "Just under 300 miles. But it feels farther." He gave a faint nod as if he understood that distance was not always measured in miles. Across the room, the older woman, who had glanced at Claire earlier, leaned toward a companion and whispered something. Claire caught her own reflection in the window, modest blazer, low heels, hair pulled back neatly. She suddenly became aware of the way her folder's edges were slightly worn. It is a strange thing how quickly we measure ourselves against strangers. Ethan followed her gaze. "You are not out of place," he said quietly. Claire offered a polite smile. "That is kind of you." "It is not kindness," he replied. "It is observation." She hesitated, then surprised herself by asking, "Do you travel like this often?" "More than I would like," he answered. "For work, yes." She waited for him to elaborate. He did not. Instead, he turned the question gently back toward her. "What would this job change for you?" "Everything," she almost said. "It would give me stability," she answered instead. "A steady paycheck, health insurance that actually covers something. The ability to stop calculating every grocery item in my head." She did not mention the stack of hospital invoices on her kitchen table. She did not mention how many nights she had fallen asleep with spreadsheets open on her laptop. But he seemed to understand anyway. Some people chase success. Others chase relief. A server approached with a tray of coffee. Ethan declined with a small shake of his head. Claire instinctively reached for her wallet before remembering that everything inside the lounge was complimentary. She withdrew her hand, quickly embarrassed by the reflex. Ethan noticed but said nothing. "You said you were flying toward something," he said after a moment. "What makes you believe this is your last chance?" Claire considered the question carefully. "Because I have already used the others," she replied. "I went back to school at 30. I moved in with my mother to save money. I took a contract job that ended without notice. I am not afraid of hard work." She met his eyes directly now. "I am afraid of running out of time." He held her gaze steady and thoughtful. "I once believed time was something you could control," he said slowly. "If you worked hard enough, if you planned carefully enough." And she asked, "And I learned that it is not." There was something in his tone that shifted the air between them. She tilted her head slightly. "You sound as though you have lost something." A flicker crossed his expression, gone almost as soon as it appeared. "I was engaged," he said. "Several years ago." Claire did not interrupt. "It ended publicly," he continued, "in a way that made headlines. I learned that when your life becomes visible, so do your mistakes." She sensed there was more, but she did not press. When a person speaks quietly about pain, it is rarely the first time they have rehearsed the words. "I am sorry," she said simply. He gave a small nod. "It taught me something." "What is that?" "That it is difficult to know who is standing beside you for the right reasons." The words lingered. Claire felt the weight of them, though she did not yet understand their full meaning. Outside the window, another aircraft lifted from the runway, rising slowly into the pale afternoon sky. Neither of them realized that before the day ended, the question of reasons and who belonged where would no longer be theoretical. The lounge had grown busier as the afternoon moved forward. Suitcases rolled softly across the carpet. A few travelers stood near the buffet counter, speaking in low, efficient tones. Yet the space around Claire and Ethan felt strangely separate, as though time had slowed in the chairs by the window. Claire folded her hands over her folder. "What happened?" she asked gently. "If you do not mind me asking." Ethan did not look away from the runway. "I trusted someone," he said, "and I did not realize that trust and visibility are not the same thing." She waited. "She said she loved me," he continued evenly. "And maybe she did. But she also loved what came with me. When a financial disagreement became public, it was not just a breakup, it was a spectacle." Claire could hear the restraint in his voice, not bitterness, not anger, something quieter. Some wounds do not bleed anymore, they simply change the way a person stands in the world. "That must have been humiliating," she said softly. "It was clarifying," he replied. She studied him, clarifying how that attention is not the same as affection, he answered, and that power distorts things, including how people see you. Claire absorbed that slowly. "Is that why you keep your answers short?" she asked. A faint smile touched his mouth. "Perhaps." She leaned back in her chair. "I have never been accused of having too much power," she said lightly. He turned toward her fully for the first time. "Do not confuse power with money," he said. "You have power. You got yourself here." The word settled somewhere deeper than she expected. She had paid for the original economy ticket by canceling her cable subscription and selling a piece of jewelry her grandmother had left her. She had rehearsed interview answers while washing dishes and memorized company data while waiting at the pharmacy with her mother. No one had ever called that power. "It does not feel like power," she admitted. "It rarely does," he said. A boarding announcement sounded in the distance, though not yet for their gate. Claire checked the time on her phone. She still had 40 minutes. Across the lounge, a man in a navy suit approached Ethan. He leaned down slightly and spoke in a lowered voice. "Mr. Carter, your car has been confirmed for arrival. Security will coordinate at landing." Claire did not immediately process the words. She simply noticed the shift in posture, the respect in the man's tone. "The formality." Ethan gave a brief nod. "Thank you, Daniel." The man stepped away. Claire felt something subtle rearrange inside her. "Mr. Carter." She turned slowly. "Carter," she repeated. Ethan met her eyes. "Yes," he said calmly. The name clicked into place. She had seen it before, on financial headlines, on business segments that played in the background while she folded laundry at her mother's house. Carter Global Investments. Her fingers tightened slightly around the edge of her folder. "You are that Carter," she said, her voice steady, but thinner now. "I am," he replied. There was no pride in his tone, no apology either, only acknowledgement. The truth does not always shout. Sometimes it simply stands there, waiting to be recognized. Claire looked around the lounge again, but this time the room felt different. The leather chairs, the polished shoes, the attentive staff. She replayed the last hour in her mind. His careful answers, his reluctance to elaborate, the older woman's glance. "You did not think I deserved to know?" she asked quietly. He shook his head once. "I did not want you to know me as a headline first. You let me speak about my bills," she said, "about possibly losing my apartment. And I listened," he answered. "That is not the same thing." Silence stretched between them, not hostile, but fragile. Outside, another aircraft began its slow ascent into the pale sky. There is a difference between being protected from the truth and being trusted with it. Claire inhaled slowly, steadying herself. "You said it is difficult to know who stands beside you for the right reasons," she said. "Did you assume I would not?" Ethan's expression shifted, something almost regretful flickering there. "I assume nothing about you," he said. "I assume something about the world." The boarding announcement for their flight finally echoed through the lounge. And in that quiet space between recognition and departure, the distance between them no longer felt accidental. The announcement repeated clear and final. Business class passengers for Flight 482 to Chicago may now begin boarding at Gate C-18. Claire rose slowly from her seat. The movement felt heavier than it should have. She gathered her folder, smoothing the edges, as if that small gesture could steady everything else. Ethan stood as well. For a brief moment, neither of them moved toward the gate. The older woman across the lounge glanced over again this time, with unmistakable curiosity. A younger man nearby checked his phone, then looked up at Ethan with recognition that bordered on admiration. The room had shifted, and Claire felt it. It is one thing to share a quiet conversation. It is another to realize the world was listening. "You should go," Ethan said gently. "You do not want to be last in line." She gave a small nod. "Neither do you." They walked side by side toward the exit of the lounge. Not close enough to touch. Not distant enough to be strangers. At the doorway, Daniel, the assistant, reappeared. His posture was straight, his tone efficient. "Mr. Carter, boarding arrangements are ready. We can escort you through a private corridor." The word escort landed like a quiet reminder. Claire paused. Ethan did not look at Daniel. His eyes remained on Claire. "That will not be necessary," he said calmly. "Thank you." Daniel hesitated for half a second before nodding and stepping aside. Claire felt a flicker of something she could not quite name. Relief, perhaps. Or recognition. They joined the boarding line with the other business class passengers. No one said anything directly, but the air felt charged with awareness. Claire kept her gaze forward. "You could have told me," she said quietly as the line moved. "I know," Ethan replied. "You let me talk about losing my apartment," she continued. "About calculating groceries. I did not let you," he said softly. "You chose to tell me." She stopped walking and turned to face him fully. "That is exactly the point." The line shifted around them, passengers adjusting impatiently. "I spoke to you as an equal," she said, "and you already knew we were not." Ethan held her gaze without flinching. "I did not want my name to shape your words," he said. "I wanted to hear them as they were, and I deserved the chance to decide whether your name mattered," she replied. Silence followed. Not angry, not loud, just honest. There is a difference between protecting yourself and denying someone else the choice to understand you. They resumed walking. At the boarding scanner, the airline agent smiled brightly at Ethan. "Welcome back, Mr. Carter. It is always a pleasure." Claire handed over her boarding pass next. The agent glanced at it briefly, then returned it with polite neutrality. The contrast was subtle, but it was there. They walked down the jet bridge together, the sound of footsteps echoing against the metal walls. "You think I assumed you would use me?" Claire said quietly. "I think I assumed the world would assume it," Ethan answered. "And you decided that for me." He did not deny it. The aircraft door came into view. A flight attendant greeted them with warmth that shifted slightly when she recognized Ethan. "Good afternoon, Mr. Carter," she said. "Your seat is ready." Claire felt the final piece fall into place. Not anger, not humiliation, just clarity. They stepped into the cabin. Their seats were in the same row. Claire placed her folder carefully in the overhead bin and sat down by the window. Ethan took the aisle seat beside her. For a moment, neither spoke. Outside, the ground crew moved in careful choreography beneath the wing. Claire rested her hands in her lap. "I do not resent what you have," she said at last. "I resent that you did not trust me with it." Ethan turned toward her slowly. "I am not used to being trusted first," he said. She looked straight ahead at the runway. "Maybe that is the problem," she replied. "Sometimes distance is not measured in miles. It is measured in what we choose not to say." The cabin door closed with a firm, quiet click, and the flight that had once felt like possibility now carried something far more uncertain. The aircraft began to taxi slowly away from the gate. The low hum of the engines deepened, vibrating faintly beneath Claire's feet. She kept her eyes on the wing outside the window, watching as the runway lights blurred into soft streaks. Beside her, Ethan sat with his hands loosely folded, gaze forward, posture steady. He did not reach for his phone. He did not retreat into a screen. For that, she was quietly grateful. The safety demonstration began. Claire listened without truly hearing it. Her thoughts were louder. Mr. Carter, Carter Global Investments, a man whose name appeared in headlines about mergers and philanthropy and market shifts, had been sitting beside her in an airport lounge asking about her grocery budget. Power does not always enter a room loudly. Sometimes it sits beside you and listens. As the plane lifted from the runway, Claire felt the familiar drop in her stomach. She inhaled slowly, steadying herself. "I do not think you understand what it feels like," she said at last, her voice measured. "Tell me," Ethan replied. "To sit across from someone who can change a city's skyline," she continued, "and speak about whether you can afford next month's rent." He absorbed that without defensiveness. "I cannot change everything," he said quietly. "You can change more than most." The aircraft leveled off above the clouds. Sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating the cabin in a pale gold glow. Claire turned toward him fully. "When you did not tell me who you were, you took away my ability to decide how much of myself to share," she said. "That matters." He nodded once. "You are right." There was no hesitation in his response. She had not expected that. "You are not going to explain it away?" she asked. "I could," he said, "but it would not change how you felt." A flight attendant approached with drinks. She addressed Ethan first, using his name, her tone polished and familiar. "Mr. Carter, may I offer you sparkling water?" Claire noticed the difference again. Subtle, but present. Ethan declined gently and glanced at Claire. "Water for both of us, please." The attendant smiled and moved on. Claire watched him for a long moment. "You are accustomed to being recognized?" she said. "Yes. And to being accommodated?" "Yes. And to being believed?" He met her eyes. "Not always." She hesitated. "Do you think I would have treated you differently?" "I do not know." He answered honestly. "That uncertainty has shaped more of my life than I would like to admit." When trust has been broken in public, it begins to fracture in private long before anyone notices. Claire rested her head lightly against the seat. "My mother always said that if someone hides something important, it is because they believe the truth will cost them," she said. "And do you believe that?" he asked. "I believe that truth always costs something," she replied. "The question is who pays." The words lingered between them. The cabin grew quieter as passengers settled in. A soft murmur of conversation filled the space. Ethan exhaled slowly. "I did not hide my name to deceive you," he said. "I hid it because I wanted one conversation that did not begin with expectation. And I wanted one opportunity that did not begin with disadvantage," Claire answered. Their eyes held. There was no anger there now, only understanding layered with disappointment. Outside, the clouds stretched endlessly beneath them, bright and deceptively soft. Claire reached into her folder and pulled out her resume. She glanced at the careful lines she had revised so many times. "This interview," she said quietly, "has to be mine. Completely mine." "It should be," Ethan agreed. She looked at him carefully. "If I walk into that office tomorrow and someone recognizes your name before mine," she continued, "I need to know it was not because you intervened." "I have not," he said. "And you will not, I will not. Respect is not proven by grand gestures. It is proven by restraint." Claire nodded once. The tension between them had shifted. It was no longer about surprise. It was about choice. As the plane continued toward Chicago, both of them understood that what happened next would not be decided by headlines or wealth or reputation. It would be decided by whether they were willing to stand on equal ground, even when the world insisted they did not. The remainder of the flight passed in thoughtful quiet. Claire reviewed her notes once, then closed her folder. There was nothing more she could memorize in the air. Preparation had brought her this far. The rest would depend on who she was when she walked into that office. Beside her, Ethan remained composed, occasionally glancing out at the clouds. He did not attempt to steer the conversation back to lighter territory. He did not try to charm his way out of discomfort. For that, she respected him. As the captain announced their descent into Chicago, a subtle shift moved through the cabin. Seatbelts clicked, laptops closed, conversations quieted. Claire felt the weight of reality settling in. "This is where we separate," she said softly, eyes still forward. "Only if you want to," Ethan replied. She turned toward him. "You know that is not what I meant." "Yes," he said, "I do." the plane dipped gently, clouds parting to reveal the grid of the city below. I meant that once we land, she continued, we step into different versions of ourselves. Yours is already known. Mine is still being decided. He studied her carefully. Your version does not depend on mine. It could, she said. That is why I am careful. The wheels touched the runway with a steady thud. The aircraft slowed, engines reversing with controlled force. There are moments in life when the ground feels closer than it did before. Not because it moved, but because you did. As they taxied toward the gate, Claire felt clarity replace confusion. I need you to promise me something, she said. Name it. If anyone asks how we met, she said, you tell them the truth. A chair, a conversation, nothing more. That is the truth, he replied, and you do not use your influence with the firm tomorrow. Not directly, not indirectly. I already told you I would not, he said. I know, she answered, but I need to hear it again. You have my word. The seatbelt sign turned off. Passengers stood quickly retrieving luggage. Claire remained seated for a moment longer. She looked at him fully now. You are not what I expected, she said. That can be taken several ways. She allowed the faintest smile. I expected arrogance or defensiveness, and instead, restraint. He exhaled slowly. I am trying. She nodded once. That matters. They stood together and stepped into the aisle. The line moved slowly toward the aircraft door. As they exited into the jet bridge, the air felt cooler, brighter. Daniel was waiting just beyond the doorway, posture precise. Mr. Carter, he said smoothly, transportation is ready. There is also a request from the Chicago Tribune for a brief comment regarding tomorrow's acquisition. Claire felt the invisible wall rise again. Ethan glanced at her before answering. Not today, he said. Reschedule. Daniel nodded, though his expression tightened slightly when he noticed Claire. Understood, he said. We can arrange separate exits if preferred. The suggestion hung in the air. Claire understood its meaning. Protection, privacy, distance. Ethan shook his head. That will not be necessary. Daniel stepped back. Claire looked at Ethan carefully. This is your world, she said. It does not have to define every moment, he replied. She took a steady breath. Tomorrow I walk into that building alone, she said. If I succeed, it will be because I earned it. If I fail, it will be mine to carry. That is fair, he answered. They reached the entrance to the terminal. The flow of passengers widened, dispersing into the noise of arrivals. Claire adjusted the strap of her bag on her shoulder. This is where we actually separate, she said. For now, Ethan replied. She held his gaze. I am not walking away because of what you have, she said. I am stepping forward because of what I need. He nodded once, then stepped forward. Sometimes dignity is not loud. It is simply the decision to stand on your own ground. Claire turned and walked toward the signs marked ground transportation, her steps steady, her shoulders squared. Behind her, Ethan remained still for a moment longer, watching her disappear into the moving crowd. And for the first time in years, the most powerful man in the terminal understood what it meant to have no control over the outcome that mattered most. Claire did not look back as she stepped out into the terminal. The noise of arrivals wrapped around her, rolling suitcases, overhead announcements, families greeting one another with relieved embraces. For a brief moment, she allowed herself to disappear into it. She checked into a modest hotel near the Loop that evening, laid her folder neatly on the small desk, and reviewed her notes one final time. The city lights outside her window shimmered against the dark glass. She slept lightly. The next morning, she walked into the headquarters of Halstead Financial Consulting with steady steps and quiet resolve. The building rose in clean lines of steel and glass reflecting the pale Chicago sky. Inside the lobby was understated but impressive. Polished floors, soft lighting, a receptionist who smiled professionally. Claire gave her name. She was led into a conference room where 3 executives sat waiting. The interview lasted nearly 90 minutes. They asked about strategy, about risk assessment, about client retention in unstable markets. Claire answered carefully, drawing on every lesson she had learned, every late night spent studying while her mother slept in the next room. When it was over, the senior partner extended his hand. "Thank you for coming, Ms. Reynolds," he said. "We will be in touch soon, soon." It was a word that could mean hope or delay. She left the building and stepped onto the sidewalk, exhaling slowly. The wind carried the scent of the river. She felt neither victorious nor defeated, only calm. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "I hope your interview went well. No matter the outcome, I respect the way you walked into it." She did not need to ask who it was. Claire read the message twice before slipping her phone back into her bag. She did not respond. Sometimes silence is not punishment. It is space. Across the city, Ethan stood in his own glass office, looking out over the skyline. Daniel stood near the door, tablet in hand. "The Tribune is asking again for a statement," Daniel said. "They also noted your presence at O'Hare yesterday." Ethan did not turn around. "And there are photos," Daniel replied carefully. "You were seen speaking with a woman in the lounge. They are speculating." Ethan's jaw tightened slightly. "Speculating about what?" "About a potential personal relationship." Ethan finally faced him. "Delete nothing, hide nothing, but do not confirm anything either." Daniel nodded. "Understood." There was a pause. "Daniel." Ethan added, "Yes, sir. If anyone from Halstead Financial receives a call from our firm today, it will not be about a candidate." Daniel met his gaze. "Of course." After Daniel left, Ethan remained still, hands resting lightly on the edge of his desk. He had built companies, negotiated acquisitions, influenced markets. Yet this felt unfamiliar. He could not call the firm. He could not ensure her success. He could not shape the narrative without shaping her future. Power feels strongest when it acts. It feels unfamiliar when it waits. That evening, Claire returned to her hotel room and removed her shoes slowly. She checked her email once. Nothing yet. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the city lights. Her phone buzzed again. Another message. "I meant what I said. I will not interfere. Whatever happens next belongs to you." She typed a response, deleted it, typed again. Finally, she sent a single line. "Thank you for keeping your word." Minutes passed, then his reply appeared. "You are welcome. No grand gesture, no invitation, no pressure." Claire set her phone aside. For the first time since sitting in that airport lounge chair, she felt something shift inside her. Not fear, not intimidation, possibility. And across the city, in a different room, with a different view, Ethan understood that the most meaningful outcomes in his life would no longer be measured in contracts. They would be measured in restraint, patience, and the courage to stand beside someone without standing above them. 2 days passed without an answer. Claire returned to Dayton on a late afternoon flight, her carry-on tucked beneath the seat in front of her. She watched the clouds drift by without truly seeing them. The interview replayed in fragments inside her mind. A question about market volatility, a discussion about long-term client retention, the senior partner's careful expression. She had done well, but well did not always mean chosen. Back home, her apartment felt smaller than she remembered. The stack of medical bills remained neatly arranged on the kitchen table. She ran her fingers along the top envelope, then moved them aside and opened her laptop instead. There were freelance spreadsheets to finish, a part-time contract that still needed attention. Life did not pause for anticipation. Her phone vibrated softly. An email notification. Her heart stilled before she even opened it. "Dear Ms. Reynolds, we are pleased to inform you." She did not read the rest at first. She simply closed her eyes. A position. "Full-time, competitive salary, health benefits, effective immediately." Claire exhaled slowly, the sound almost a laugh and almost a sob. She had done it. Not because of a name, not because of influence, because she was prepared. Some victories arrive quietly. They do not need witnesses to be real. She called her mother first. They cried together over the phone. Then she sat alone at her small kitchen table and allowed herself 5 full minutes of relief. Later that evening, her phone buzzed again. A news alert. Carter Global withdraws from proposed riverfront acquisition. She frowned and opened the article. The acquisition had been controversial. The development would have displaced several long-standing small businesses near the river. The article quoted Ethan Carter directly. We have reconsidered the long-term impact on the community. Growth should not come at the expense of dignity. Claire read the line twice. There was no mention of her, no connection drawn between his decision and their conversation. But she remembered the way he had listened when she spoke about relief, not ambition. Change rarely announces its inspiration. It simply alters direction. Her phone vibrated once more. I heard congratulations are in order, Ethan's message read. She smiled faintly. You heard correctly, she replied. I start in 3 weeks. I am glad, he wrote. You earned it. There was a pause before the next message arrived. I would like to see you again. Not in a lounge, not by accident, only if you are willing. Claire stared at the screen. The easy answer would have been no. Protect the boundary, preserve the clarity she had fought for. But clarity did not require distance. It required intention. Chicago, she typed. There is a public art gallery near the river, Saturday afternoon. No reservations, no private rooms. A moment later, his response appeared. I will be there. She set her phone down and looked around her modest apartment, the peeling paint near the window, the aging refrigerator humming in the background. In 3 weeks, she would leave this place, not to escape it, but because she had outgrown it. Across the state line, in an office overlooking the city he had helped reshape, Ethan closed his laptop and leaned back in his chair. He had walked away from a profitable deal that morning. His board had questioned him. Analysts would speculate. Yet for the first time in a long while, the decision had felt uncomplicated, not impulsive, aligned. When power begins to listen instead of dictate, it transforms the one who holds it. Saturday was approaching, and this time, neither of them would mistake the seat they were choosing. Saturday afternoon arrived with a soft autumn light that turned the Chicago River into a ribbon of silver. Claire stood outside the public art gallery she had chosen, her coat buttoned neatly against the breeze. The building was modest brick exterior, tall windows displaying abstract paintings and black and white photography. Nothing exclusive, nothing private, intentional. She had taken the early train in from Dayton that morning, wanting time to walk the city alone before meeting him. In 3 weeks, she would move here permanently. The thought no longer frightened her. It steadied her. Across the street, traffic moved in patient lines. A bus sighed to a stop. Somewhere nearby, a street musician played a slow melody on a violin. Claire checked her watch. Right on time, Ethan approached from the corner, hands in the pockets of his dark coat, no security visible, no assistant at his side. He walked at an ordinary pace, not hurried, not delayed. When he reached her, he stopped a respectful distance away. Hello, Claire? Hello, Ethan? There was a moment where either of them could have stepped forward or stepped back. Neither did. They entered the gallery together. The space was quiet, the scent of fresh paint faint in the air. A series of photographs lined the main wall, each capturing cityscapes in transition old buildings beside new steel towers. They stood in front of one image, showing a small corner store, reflected in the glass of a skyscraper. It feels familiar, Claire said. Why, he asked. Because both things are real, she replied. They just do not carry the same weight. He nodded slowly. They moved deeper into the room, pausing before a large canvas, painted in muted blues and golds. I read about the riverfront decision, she said carefully. Yes, you lost money. I did. She studied him. Do you regret it? No. He did not elaborate. Growth does not always mean expansion. Sometimes it means restraint. Claire folded her hands loosely in front of her. I got the offer because of my interview, she said. Not because of you. I know, he answered, and I needed that to be true. It is. They stood in silence for a few seconds longer. I have been thinking about what you said in the lounge, she continued, about not wanting your name to shape the conversation, and he asked quietly. I understand it now, she admitted, but understanding does not erase impact. He met her gaze fully. I know. I cannot promise that this will be simple, she said. Your world is large. Mine is just beginning. I do not need simple, he replied. I need honest. She searched his face for arrogance, for hidden control, for the instinct to dominate. She found none. What does this look like to you? She asked. He considered the question seriously. It looks like two people who met by accident, he said, and who are choosing carefully not to make that accident a mistake. A faint smile touched her lips. Outside the gallery windows, the river moved steadily beneath the bridge. I will be working long hours, she said. I will not rearrange my life around yours. I would not ask you to, he answered. And if I ever feel smaller than I did that day in the lounge, she continued, I will walk away. He nodded once. That is fair. She took a slow breath. Then we begin there, she said. Not with promises, not with declarations, but with terms that belong to both of them. They walked out of the gallery, side by side, not touching yet, no longer divided by uncertainty. The wind lifted a strand of Claire's hair, and she laughed softly as she brushed it back. Ethan smiled not because he had secured something, but because he had not tried to. Some stories do not end with spectacle, they end with balance. As they crossed the bridge over the Chicago River, the city stretching before them, neither felt overshadowed. There was no private corridor, no hidden exit, just two people moving forward on equal ground. And for the first time, the space between power and possibility felt wide enough for both of them. The weeks that followed did not unfold like a fairy tale, they unfolded like real life. Claire moved to Chicago 3 weeks later, just as she had planned. Her new apartment was small, but bright, a third-floor walk-up with a narrow balcony that overlooked a row of maple trees. The paint was fresh. The floors creaked slightly. It was hers. Her first day at Halstead Financial Consulting began at 8 in the morning sharp. She wore the same modest blazer she had worn in the airport lounge, though it now felt different on her shoulders. Earned. The work was demanding. Client portfolios, market analyses, long meetings that stretched past 6 in the evening. She returned home most nights tired but alert, her mind still turning over numbers and strategies. She did not ask Ethan to adjust his schedule. He did not ask her to adjust hers. They met when they could, sometimes for coffee near the river, sometimes for a quiet walk after her workday ended. There were no photographers waiting, no private rooms, just conversations. One evening, as autumn deepened and the air sharpened with the promise of winter, they sat on a bench overlooking the Chicago River. The city lights reflected against the water in scattered gold. I had a board meeting today, Ethan said. And Claire asked. They questioned my recent decisions. The riverfront project, she said. Yes, she studied his expression. Did you doubt yourself? He shook his head. No. She nodded slowly. Then it was the right decision. He looked at her with quiet gratitude. You measure success differently than most people I know. I measure it by what I can live with, she replied. Integrity is not loud. It is simply consistent. At work, Claire began to make her own mark. Her analysis during a volatile quarter impressed the senior partners. One afternoon, the same executive who had interviewed her stopped by her desk. We made the right choice, he said. She thanked him calmly, though her heart lifted. Later that evening, she told Ethan about the conversation. I am proud of you, he said. She smiled. Be careful. Why, I do not need you to be proud of me. I need you to respect me. He did not hesitate. I do. The simplicity of that answer carried more weight than any grand declaration could have. As winter approached, their meetings grew more comfortable. Laughter came more easily. Disagreements were spoken openly and resolved without performance. One night, standing outside her apartment building after dinner, Ethan hesitated before leaving. I would like this to be more than occasional, he said. Not rushed, not hidden, just real. Claire considered him carefully. We build it slowly, she said, without shortcuts. I am not looking for shortcuts, he replied. She stepped closer, closing the small space that had once felt so significant in an airport lounge. For the first time, she reached for his hand. Not because he had power, not because he had changed the direction of a deal, but because he had learned to stand beside her without standing above her. He held her hand gently, as though aware that it was not possession, but permission. Love does not equalize status. It equalizes choice. They stood there for a moment beneath the dim streetlight. Two people who had met by accident in a quiet room between departures. Now, months later, there were no misunderstandings about seats or names. There were only two lives unfolding at different scales, choosing to move forward together. And if anyone were to ask how it began, the answer would remain simple. A chair, a conversation, and the courage to begin again on equal ground. Sometimes love is not about who has more. It is about who is willing to stand beside you without making you smaller. Claire did not choose wealth, she chose dignity. And Ethan did not prove himself through power, he proved himself through restraint. What began as a simple misunderstanding in a quiet airport lounge became something far more meaningful. Not because fate demanded it, but because two people chose honesty over fear. Yet real life has a way of testing even the most careful beginnings. A new career, public attention, old wounds that take time to heal, and their story is not finished yet. If this chapter spoke to you, we invite you to stay with us for what comes next. We hope you will join us again.
Thank you so much for staying with me until the very end. If this story touched you, more of my most gripping stories are already waiting on your screen. Click one now. I promise you're going to love it. See you in the next one.